Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We are going to continue on with this week's theme of title tracks, looking at songs that share a name with the album they're on. Today we're going to be looking at the band or group or artist iamthemorning, all one word, all lowercase. The track in question comes off of the album Lighthouse. Let's dive into this and see what's going on with iamthemorning. Yes, I love the piano performance. The dynamics of the attacks, the volume, all the different nuances being pulled out of the performance. The stretching and releasing of time, it speeds up, it slows down. The airiness of the vocals, a little bit of reverb on them, the layering of that reverb and airiness, so good. The patience here. Nine-beat phrase, interesting. It's already spacious, but they put even more space in it. Maybe the phrasing feels like it's constantly changing. Sometimes it's 9 beats, sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 7. It might be free time with just a really good synergy between our two musicians. A little flourish. Alright, we got a nice 3-4 here too. I gotta retroactively, off to the second listen, I'll be trying to apply this 3-4 thing to it. So gorgeous. strings are such a nice addition as well. Yeah. Well, this was good. This was real good. So the song exists primarily in two parts, and not a lot happens in the first. We have the piano and the vocals. The piano, well, they typically work in call and response, don't they? We get a little piano, well, we get the vocal line, and then we get a piano run, and then a vocal line, and then a piano run. And sometimes, to split these up, we also have pockets of silence, allowing whoever played last or sang last to allow their section to taper off and linger for a while with nothing else happening. What's really important here isn't the composition itself, though there are some really neat flourishes and ideas presented in both the notes themselves and the rhythmic quality of the notes, but it really is to me the nuance of it when you listen to the vocals and how they get layered and how they're delivered and the minor fluctuations in, I guess we can call it presence, the amount of airiness in it, how solid or ethereal the vocals feel. Also in volume and width, though. We can also look at the nuance of the piano work in much the same way. A really nice thing about playing a real piano, which I'm pretty sure is what was played here, rather than playing a keyboard. Well, actually, samples are getting very good. So maybe this isn't as accurate anymore, but the piano is actually a percussion style instrument. It's a series of, it's almost like a what is it, a Rube Goldberg machine? Is that the right name for it? Where like you have a series of contraptions that, one thing sets off another, sets off another. That's kind of what happens here. When you press down a key, it's actually tied to a mallet, and the mallet swings down and hits the string. So it's actually possible to get a wide variety of sounds, timbres, volumes, and even forces out of playing a piano based on how quickly and with how much force you push the key. And two of those are really important. You can push over a long time, or a longer time, I should say, with a lot of force. And it would sound very differently than if you quickly slam down on the key. Even though the force might be the same, the time that it takes for the mallet to hit and pull itself back off is different. Um, and so the piano is actually an exceptionally expressive instrument. And like I said, samples nowadays might be a little bit different, and I'm sure they're able to capture more of this nuance, especially if you have pressure sensitive keyboard. But at least back in the day, before things got so good at being difficult to distinguish between samples and live, um, piano's very difficult to replicate because of all the nuance in the performance. And you can absolutely hear all of that. Here we do have width and volume, But we also have different types of attacks, different types of playing, how fast we move into that note, how fast the key is pressed, how much pressure is used to push the key. And it is just a gorgeous piano performance here. This definitely falls more in line with what I've talked about primarily in reference to classical music, where it's not just enough to play the notes, but you need to play the notes right. And that is 100% here. You could certainly play all of these notes. You could probably even get most of the vocal dynamic qualities down, and it still would not feel the same as this performance. It would still be lacking in an area, and part of that is making sure that everything is played perfectly on so many different variables. Interestingly, there is also another component to this, and it's time. Like I said, now that I know that our ending is in 3/4, it makes me want to go back and listen to the first section and figure out if that can be applied there. But based off of the pulse that I can feel from the vocal melody, the phrasing is different all the time. Some parts are, well, I counted as 9. It's a very slow tempo on top of that, so I could be a little off as far as half beats and quarter beats as well, where we might have to push it towards something over 16 or something over 32 in order to get a proper time signature. But generally speaking, I found some that were 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, I think even at one point I picked up on. It feels as if there's either something much larger at play, looking at maybe even whole sections, 32 bars at a time, 16 bars at a time, more so than looking at when a phrase repeats. And I was looking at when a phrase repeats as when the piano starts. That was a pretty good placement for where beat 1 would be. And that never seemed to be in the same place twice. And that makes it interesting. At least to me, as I commented earlier, it feels like free time. But I'm going to assume, since the vocalist is. Oh no, that doesn't need to be accurate, does it? I was going to say, I assume the vocalist is the guest, the featured artist here, which means that the piano would have been somebody in the group already, and that's 2 people, but that doesn't need to be true. It's quite possible that the pianist and the vocalist were one and the same. Primarily because I don't know what I Am the Morning typically make, so I don't know which one of these is more accurate to their style. Maybe they both are, in which case it makes sense that the instrumentation is the band and we have a featured vocalist, but if they never do anything like this piano work, well, maybe the piano work is the featured artist as well. What I'm getting at though is free time between 2 people is very difficult. It takes a lot of practice, synergy, and probably more accurately, physical cues. If both your hands are on the keys, you might raise your body up to like and 1, right? Something like that. Or maybe the vocalist is controlling it since they don't have to use their hands for anything and they can, dictate when we're going to move on. But we also have this squashing and stretching of time that we see with the opening piano lines where we start out slow and then we speed up, we get faster, and kind of slow down a little at the top and speed up a little bit coming down and then slow down at the bottom again. And it's a very expressive type of playing that works best outside of time. You can certainly fit a time signature to it, but again, depending on where some of these fluctuations end up, if you go to transpose this, you might find yourself working with like 18 over 32 for a time signature for a single bar in order to line this back up. And that's where things get messy, and it just makes sense to possibly write it in 3/4 free time, where there's 3 beats per bar, there's 3 beats of music here, but you can take your time playing it. That kind of vibe. But once again, it's difficult to coordinate that between 2 people, so free time feels less obvious. possible, but less obvious. So I'm really interested about the time signature, but that's only purely from a curiosity angle. As I just got done saying, it's not really about the numbers that make the piece interesting, it's the performance. The time signature honestly doesn't matter unless you're like me and you just need to know. My whole job up here is to listen to music and know, or at least figure out or give my own interpretation of what's going on. So the fact that I have this drive to know what it is, it probably shouldn't be too surprising, but it's really not that important. The end result is from the dynamic elements, regardless of how that might be transposed or what math goes into counting that out. It's really just what it does that's important. Which is why a lot of really great music can be made by people who have never touched sheet music. They have no idea how they would even go about writing music. Um, Maybe even outside of tablature. Maybe they've never worked with tablature either. Everything's memorized. Um, Great music comes out of that too, because it's all about how it feels. The transposition, the figuring out the magic behind it, that's nice. It's cool, especially as a musician or a composer yourself. It helps you understand how people achieve specific things so that you might do something similar in the future. But for pure enjoyment, it's not necessary. We get a couple variations on this. We hear some different piano lines. We get some vocal layering at times. Just really gorgeous atmospheric writing until like 2 minutes to go in the track. And we bring in the band. And we have two of the female vocals. I think same person, right? They sometimes harmonize, sometimes play off of each other. We have the male vocals. We have a guitar over on the right, just strumming chords, giving us a nice pulse on our three. We also have strings in the background, just really filling out the space. The drums come in. Is there a piano here? I can't remember. There's another. Oh, there's a bass. Dude, did you guys hear the bass? I don't think I brought it up at all. Unfortunately, there's so many beautiful moments in this section. Really hard to point to them all. The bass just had this gorgeous moving line, like a melody hidden under everything else. It had a difficult time shining through the mix, but when you could hear it, just gorgeous ideas. Lovely. Um, and so we have this multi melodic section. We have a lot of foundational stuff, right? Strings are just playing chords in the background. We got chords on the guitar, but we have a melody in the bass. We have three melodies up in the vocals, and they are all just playing off of each other. They all have different roles. They all have different lines. It is just this massive section of counterpoint, and it just has all this bright hopefulness to it, which I thought was really interesting coming off of the last section, where our A section had a bit of mixed emotion, but overall, at least to me, felt haunting and lonely. This was very warm and reassuring. It was almost like coming out of a storm and having the sun shine down and feeling that warmth after sitting in that isolation for so long. Just a really great way to move into that. The last thing I want to hit on here is just chords and notes in general. There are some fantastic intervals and chordal movements that we hear in this track that just don't get utilized too much in mainstream music. There's a lot of nuance to the emotional resonance in this track in both sections, and just a lot of maturity on the chord theory side of things and focusing on notes and how notes relate to each other and what emotions they can pull out of being played next to this one or with that one or in this specific configuration. And it makes me want to check out more I Am the Morning, because the soundscapes here, the emotional journey I was taken on, it was exceptionally mature for a song that feels very close to mainstream style. I don't think too many people would listen to this and find it to be too abrasive in pretty much any direction. I think the worst thing you might hear about it is some hardcore metalheads might call it too palatable. um, it's just a gorgeous song from start to finish with so many great moments. And it certainly pays off. There is a building of tension throughout the first 4 minutes, and it can start to feel a little bit near the end, like we've been in the section just a hair bit too long. But I think that tension is required to really get that strong payoff there, moving into our final section. I'm gonna hit some lyrics here, figure out what they're talking about, and then we'll wrap this up. I'm definitely missing some elements here, but there's some strong allusions, or I should say metaphors, possibly between uh, people who help others but never receive that help in return, and a lighthouse, which I think it's pretty easy to see those parallels. We start off with life has never shown you the way out of this place, but I have come here to take you away. If this place is feeling lost, then I think that absolutely makes sense in this metaphor of the lighthouse. Like being lost at sea, maybe heavy fog, maybe a storm, and not really knowing where to go, but you see the lighthouse, and that's your sign. Land is coming up. Don't crash into this place, and maybe there's a place to dock. I don't know. Maybe I think lighthouses are just to show you where land is, isn't it? Hmm. Yeah, maybe my metaphor is gonna fall apart a little bit here. um. Anyways, it says no one ever wonders, and then we get another voice says this world is full of wonders. Am I the one to let them know? They will not listen though. Voice is getting thinner. Will I survive? Please tell me how. Shall I be gone to save the rest? When will I finally rest? And this idea that, I have my own troubles. All I ever do is help other people, but, maybe one day I'd like to not do that. Maybe one day I'd like to be the one who gets helped. We do have an idea of a storm. Storm here is coming, but I'm not coming home. Storm here is coming. I'm on my own. And I think that's interesting because I did talk about a storm earlier during the musical analysis, but I think that's the only place that we talk about a storm at all. So we get this really interesting stanza. It says, air has turned to liquid. I swim across the crimson sea, my hands and legs done into fins. If so, then why do I sink? Completely goes over my head. The Crimson Sea seems to be something that stands out. We haven't colored or described the color of the water in any of the stanzas so far. We will eventually talk about the crashing of waves and, again, not bring up a color, but we specifically talk about a crimson sea here. The air turning to liquid is a very strong visual description. And the idea of one's body. Uh, Becoming fins as if to be at home in water but still sinking is a really interesting illusion as well. Believing that you have the tools to survive but still failing. How it relates to anything else, though, again, I've got nothing. And then we repeat this one stanza over and over and over. This is the B section where we have the male vocals come in and we have the three vocal lines all sort of dancing around each other. And all of a sudden, there's nowhere to go, no one to follow, and you're on your own. I've had enough of this, only the waves crashing down on the shore so slow. We're all alone in this. Soothe all your pain, bring you back to your home. You're all alone. This concept of eventually finding your way, but still being isolated. And I think it's really interesting that we have literary allusions to isolation in the first half of our song, but it never really brings up this idea of being alone so plainly. And now that we have so many vocals all overlapping, all these instruments, this is certainly the least sparse writing we've had, the least isolating musically. We hyper focus on the idea of being alone. The idea we're all alone, or you're on your own, or I'm on my own. The idea of being alone is so present in this repetitive ending that it seems to be inverted with the themes of the music. Really makes me curious what their intentions were with this, and what they were specifically trying to say. Because, like I said, the metaphor still goes over my head a little bit. I think I'm on the right track, but I'm losing it. um, but yeah, so I guess let's wrap this up. Those are my thoughts on "I Am the Morning's Lighthouse," a beautiful song that I guess I don't really understand. I had my own interpretation of the music, but the lyrics seem to be pushing against that a bit. What do you think of this track? Did you enjoy it? Was there anything that stood out to you? Anything you'd like to correct me on or give me your own perspective on? Put those thoughts down in the comments. Above the comments in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. In there, you can find a link to the Discord, my music, ways to support the channel, so much more. There's a ton of stuff in there. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. All right, we have a special selection coming up as well. Otherwise, be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. We're going to wrap up this week's theme and check out a special selection and a creator request. So until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.